Good evening. I'd like to call the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Tuesday, February 13th, 2018 to order. As is customary, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Charlie, if you would please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for coming this evening. It's always nice to see a full room. In a previous job, I sat in front of empty rooms quite often. I'm not sure why. It might have been me. Nonetheless, we have three items on our agenda this evening. The first of which is to discuss and take possible action to award a bid for Jacob's Beach platform. The second is to receive a presentation on the Parks and Recreation proposed disc golf course at Peddler's Park and accept input from the public on the project. And then lastly, we have an item that will most likely take under executive session. We will take under executive session on a potential land acquisition move. Just some rules of the road. I suspect the second item is the one that we need some clarification on how we're going to proceed. Rick Maynard will make a presentation. At the conclusion of that presentation, we will entertain questions related to the presentation. And then at the end of the questions, hopefully we've satisfied those that we can. Those that we are unable to, we will go back and get those answers for you, and most likely post those on the town website. So please be aware that it's our intention to answer the questions to the best of our ability this evening, but we'll follow up if needed. And then lastly, you will have the opportunity to express your opinion. And the rules are rather traditional. You come up to the podium, give your name and address for the record, and then share your thoughts with us. So with that, item one, and this is also Parks and Recreation, Director Rick Maynard, to discuss and take possible action to award bid 5-1718 Jacob's Beach platform. Rick, if you'd be so kind as to just give an overview of this project and where it fits in with the longer-term development of the Jacobs Beach area.
Okay, and I'm going to call on Will Thompson in a second so he can give a little more detail about what the plan is down there. But as you know, we've had several phases for the Jacobs Beach improvements, and I won't go through all the details of all the phases, but you know the improvements of the boardwalk and the landscaping and the grass, separation between the beach and the parking lot, and irrigation in that area. And the third phase, which is part of the original project approved by Planning and Zoning, was to have a platform that extends from the current boardwalk toward the playground, toward the walkway there. And that's where we are at this point. We had bid opening last February 6th, and we had 3 bids. And before I get into those, ask for your approval of those bids. I thought maybe have Will come up and just give you just a little bit more overview of what we're talking about.
Wonderful.
And if I can do that, then I'll ask you to approve the bid.
Certainly.
I realized we were having a rainfall. Can you see this? Or?
Yeah. It's more important for the audience to see.
Yeah. Sure. All right, for the record, Will Thompson, I'm an architect, 28 South Fair Street, Guilford. Try to be very brief. Basically, this is a map of Jacobs Beach. I need to point at it, so I'm going to come over here. And I just want to help you visualize what we're talking about, so then it's easier for you to decide what you think about it. So here's an existing map, Seaside Ave, this is the water. This is the existing boardwalk. This is the parking area, the playground. The pink area are the additive platform that we're talking about. Be the same boardwalk material as the rest of it, Ipe on the top. All the framing and foundations are based on FEMA guidelines, same specification. And it's basically just this area south of that shower podium and south of the existing picnic areas. And it was part of the original plan that was approved, included actually a larger area of boardwalk here. We've scaled it back a little bit. And Coastline, who was the low bidder, very qualified bidder, we recommended you award it to them. And they actually were the contractor on the original boardwalk on this project. I don't know if you want me to go into more detail, questions?
Questions? Okay. Good. Just quickly, why was the project scaled back?
Well, originally, when we did the main project, we broke into several parts. We had an idea incrementally of a budget, which the project was within the budgets, and we didn't think there was the funding at that time. So this is something that the Park and Rec Commission has wanted for a long time, and I believe they've set it up in their funds over the last year and a half or so, and so now we want to move forward.
Question. Rick, you want to come back up? The funding mechanism, as I understand it, is going to be from the reimbursable account?
Correct.
Okay. And the reimbursable account is the fees that are collected for outside programs that you run that are not staffed locally by town employees. Is
Correct.
that correct? Okay. Any other questions? Nope. None? Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion to award the bid for the work at the Jacobs Beach platform to Coastline Consulting for $134,000?
Before we go to that, on
Certainly.
the bid itself, can you just get into the exceptions a little bit with Coastline?
The exceptions, and Will, I think you can help me with this too, but the exceptions were, is this mic on? You guys hear me okay? No. All right, well, I'll talk loud. The exceptions were the amount of time it takes to order the wood. And I think the original deadline, they had some issues with that, because to order the pressure-treated wood, it could take up to 12 weeks.
Well, it's a special specification because it's similar to what you do in piers. So the wood is, you want to be over here?
My question is, you have 3 listed here.
Correct.
Is it a selection between them, or are all 3 of those?
No, so those exceptions were all on their bid sheet, on Coastline's bid sheet, but in reviewing it with Park and Rec staff and in the Selectmen's office, we felt that it was a reasonable request and that it was a very good bid. And in reality, those materials take that long. We've run into this before. If anything, this bidder was being the most forthright about it from what we saw.
Anything further? Any other questions? Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll move.
Charlie, second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? None. Thank you very much. Item 2, receive presentation on Parks and Recreation disc golf course at Peddler's Park. And Rick, you're going to be using the overhead?
Yes. Did you guys be able to see that? Or,
I'm going to take a walk, actually.
I'm not sure why the mic isn't working, but I'll just use my old camp director voice and talk loud. Well, as Tony is just bringing that up, I just a little introduction. I want to appreciate the opportunity to share a project that's very close to the Parks and Recreation Commission, something that we've been working on for a number of months, and we're glad to have another opportunity to present this publicly, as we did at the Planning and Zoning public hearing back in December. So what I'm going to do is give a brief overview of the history of Peddler's Park. I think a lot of people aren't aware it was a park, an actively used park for a number of years. I'm going to go over that a little bit, some of that history, and then the current history, where we are and how we got to where we are today. and then why are we looking at Peddler's Park versus some other areas. And then after I finish, I'm going to have Craig Smolin come up, who's actually our designer, and he can give a little more detail about the way it's designed and why it's designed the way it is. So the brief history: in December 1957, there was a newspaper article mentioning making Peddler's Road site into a park. July 10th, 1961, we found minutes of a Board of Finance meeting showing that the Garden Club donated $100 for development of Peddler's Road site for park use. In 1964, a Shoreline Times article, there was a picture of a plan in the article on Peddler's Park being developed, and it talked about a picnic area, camping, hiking, softball, volleyball, horseshoes, and badminton. And then Jim Portley, our town engineer, was here, I think, around that time. I was not, but he remembers there being a pickup softball field there in the meadow area, and also a picnic area during the 70s. In August of 1989, may sound like, what is this relevant to, but I thought it was interesting, the Parks and Recreation Commission considered a request from the Guilford Interfaith Housing at Peddler's Park, and that was in Board of Selectmen minutes. So there's some talk about putting housing in Peddler's Park, which would have been obviously a whole different use of that facility. And then in May 1993, the Westwoods Trails chairperson requested the Parks and Recreation Commission expand parking, and that was in Board of Selectmen minutes from 1993. I've been made aware that there have been Girl Scout groups that were brought down there for camping. There was a group called the Clam Diggers that used to camp there. If any of you have been in town for a long time, you've probably heard of the famous frog jumping contests, and I've heard about that. I don't know exactly why it closed, other than I also had heard that there were some issues with cake parties with kids down there, and I think more importantly, in 1980, Bindner Park was opened and developed, where there was a real softball field, real soccer field. The field that was at Peddler's was a picnic, more of a pickup softball field, so it wasn't like a competitive softball field, from my understanding. And so when Bindner opened, for whatever reason, Peddler's got abandoned. And I don't say abandoned, it was still used for hiking trails, but the rest of the use was no longer in use. So the more recent history is the Parks and Recreation Commission has placed Peddler's Park in the 5-year capital plan for a number of years, going back to about 2012. We had it as a 5-year plan, in our 5-year plan for all these years, to do something there. It was a placeholder. At the time, there was no distinction of what we were going to do, but we knew at some point we wanted to reclaim it as a park since it had been let go for so many years. And then many are aware that there was a discussion of a dog park there in that meadow area in the spring and summer of 2015. Volunteers actually ended up building at Nut Plains Park starting in December of 2016. In 2016. They started in the December of 2015. And then in November of 2016, with the rise of the popularity of disc golf, the Parks and Recreation Commission wanted to try a disc golf tournament, which we held at the Guilford Lakes Golf Course. That was on a Saturday in November. 80 people came, and that convinced us there was a real interest in disc golf. And that time we were understanding that there was a rise in interest in disc golf. There's actually an article in the Guilford Courier, I don't have the date, but I think it was in 2016 sometime, with a picture of a guy practicing at the fairgrounds. And in the article, it talked about the rise of popularity of disc golf, and the headline said, "When is the shoreline going to catch on?" So that kind of inspired us. We saw that article, we talked about it at a commission meeting, and we thought we should look into this. And so we offered that one-day tournament at Guilford Lakes, and as I said, 80 people came. Half of them were Guilford residents, and all ages. There were 8-year-old kids, families, senior citizens. It was an attraction for all ages, and we had tremendous feedback from people because we had offered that. So, and then in June of 2017, the commission considered Bindner Park and Peddler's Park for a possible 18-hole golf course. We walked both areas. We walked both areas with professionals, and the professionals thought that Peddler's was a much better opportunity for a disc golf course. And so then in June of 2017, The commission had discussed this at their meeting, and on July 10th, the commission selected Peddler's Park as the place to develop a disc golf course. So we've been talking about it for over 6 months, and identifying Peddler's as being the location for that disc golf course. And then, so people ask, why Peddler's Park? Why not Bittner Park? We relied a lot on the experts, okay, the people who play disc golf, the people who design disc golf, and the professionals. And as I said, we walked both areas. You're going to hear people talking about the concern with trails at Peddler's Park. There are a lot more trails in Bittner Park, trails crisscrossing all over the park. It's a multi-use park. There's a lot of other things going on in Bittner Park. And Peddler's, as we all know, is a trailhead, only trailhead for, not the only, it's a trailhead for going into Westwoods, and that's the only use of that park right now. It's for hiking. And so it was a 30-acre park under the jurisdiction of the Parks and Recreation Commission by town charter, and the commission decided this is the best place for it. It's an underutilized piece of property, and it's a beautiful area, and there's parts of that park that nobody goes to. If you hike on the trails, they're wonderful trails. They're really beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of property. But there's another 30 acres in there, or sections of 30 acres, that nobody goes to because there's no reason to go there. Now with a disc golf course, it'll draw people to those other parts of that beautiful piece of property that people in the community can now enjoy. So Peddler's Park, the other reasons there are actually less trees and less brush to remove. Bittner had a lot more undergrowth, lower shrub, brush type stuff that have to come out. So it was really less work to do it at Peddler's. Little conflict with other activities. Again, Bittner has many crossing trails, several crossing streams. It's a heavily used park. And then also, again, the popularity of disc golf has been growing statewide and nationwide over the last few years. There are, I believe, 27 disc golf courses in Connecticut now, and it's growing. It's a very popular, becoming a more popular sport for all ages. We also believe it's a relatively low environmental impact, and we emphasized that when we met with the Inland Wetlands Commission. And I think they agreed with that because they did approve it. And it's a relatively low, when I say relative, is compared to if we would put a soccer field or a baseball field, lacrosse field there. We're talking about minor clearing of trees. No trees bigger than 8 inches would come down. And it's mostly undergrowth and brush. And so it's going to look a lot like a trail, maybe a little bit wider than that, with undergrowth removed. So a relatively low environmental impact, and we believe a relatively low impact on the neighborhood. A typical disc golf course, and we've spoken with in 4 other communities that have disc golf, and I asked them, during peak time, how many people are we talking about? They said peak time, probably 20 people. So I'm guessing it's like 10 cars, maybe 12 cars. So I don't see that as a big impact on travel, transportation, or traffic, or the neighborhood. And keep in mind, when people play, they're not 20 people all in one group. They're scattered around. They go, someone will start in hole 1, somebody in hole 9 or 10, and they move on from there. So it's groups of 2 or 4, traveling through the park at a time. So it's not a big crowd of people there. And we believe it's a good mix with the current use of the trails as opposed to some other possible activities that could be proposed for Peddler's Park. I just want to, I don't know if we have it up on here or not, but the approval process, October 11th, Inland Wetlands Commission approved our request to have the disc golf course there. October 27th, we met with 3 members of the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I met with 3 members of the Land Trust to look at their concerns, because they clearly had some concerns with the crossing of the trails with the fairways and the possible chance for injury with a disc flying. And so we went back to Craig Smolin. He redesigned it to address many of those concerns, move some of the fairways to move them away from the trails. But I want to emphasize here, I'm not representing that the Land Trust is satisfied with everything we did there. I don't want to make that representation, but we did listen to them, and we made some changes to try to appease some of those concerns. And then so we went back to wetlands again because when Craig moved some of the fairways to get them away from the trails, it brought some of them closer to the wetlands, had to go back to the Wetlands Commission, and they approved it again, a second time. And then that was November 8th. Then on December 20th, the Planning and Zoning Commission had a public hearing where there was pros and cons, people against the project spoke, people for the project spoke, and Planning and Zoning approved the project. And the Planning and Zoning chairman made it clear we did not have to have a public hearing. We requested the public hearing because we wanted to give the public an opportunity to speak for or against the project. We wanted to make sure we were transparent, we wanted everything out there, and for them to hear from everybody. And they approved it. And to my knowledge, there was no appeal of that approval. So to my knowledge, we could have gone forward and started the disc golf course. Kevin McGee posted the parking area for the trees that have to come down. We've always made it clear that the trees in the parking area are getting all cleared out. If we're going to expand parking, you got to move the trees out of there. That was posted, and again, to my knowledge, nobody protested the posting of those trees or challenged or questioned it. So as far as I'm concerned, we've gone through all the approval process, and we've been forthcoming with all of our plans here. It was in the Guilford Courier 3 times. There were articles in the newspaper going back to June. There was Channel 3 News actually interviewed me to talk about the disc golf course on TV. We talked about looking at Bittner Park and Peddler's Park. At that time, we didn't know where we were going with it. So there's been, I think, a lot of public information that's been out there. The Parks and Recreation Commission meetings are open to the public. They're televised. And so, again, we've been talking about this for over a year, that we were going to look into do a disc golf course, and we identified in June and officially voted in July that it was going to be at Peddler's Park. And we had no input from anybody in the public. Nobody came to a commission meeting either for or against. So we've been talking about it for a long time. I'm requesting that we move forward because we have 3 Eagle Scouts, and I thank you all for coming in uniforms. You guys look great. We have 3 Eagle Scouts that are counting on this project for their Eagle badges, and some of them have deadlines. One of them is James Crosley is going to make a kiosk, which would have the layout of the course and the list of the rules. And Cliff Makoviak is going to build the tee boxes. Tee boxes are 4x4 timbers. They're about roughly 5 feet by 10 feet, and they're stone dust. And that's where people throw the discs from, is the tee area. And Anthony Rossello? Alex Rossello just came to the commission meeting last week. He wants to build some benches along the tee areas. And one thing I want to emphasize is that I think when people hear golf course, they think that it's being clear-cut, that we're taking down, like a fairway on a golf course. And it's a little misleading when you look at the plan here, and Craig will be able to comment maybe a little better on it. But it looks like a 50-foot wide open swath. And, well, this is why we have this up here. This is, I think, Lufberry Park in Wallingford. And you can see that the tee boxes in the front here, and it's basically like a trail through the woods. It's generally they're cleared about 20, 30, maybe 40 feet wide. The undergrowth could be 50 feet, the brush. But again, as we have always said, no trees larger than 8 inches are going to come down. And when Craig is working on designing this, and when we actually go out and lay it out, on the actual property, if the plan is to have the tee box here, but there are 5 big trees in front of it, okay, well, maybe the tee box is getting moved over 5 feet. We're not going to take any big trees down. That's part of the challenge for disc golfers, to have obstacles, and the trees are part of the whole challenge of disc golf. So I have 3 Eagle Scouts. In-kind service. I need to mention this. Anderson Engineering gave us a $2,500 discount on surveying the whole property. Bartlett Tree Company is offering to take all the trees down in the parking lot for nothing, $3,500 value. Anthony LaFata, who's sitting here, graciously is offering to rip out the stumps, build the parking lot, $20,000 value for nothing. So we have businesses in town who are behind this project, are that much in favor of it. They're willing to help us at no cost. It's about a $25,000 value that these businesses are willing to help us with. The other volunteer, I'd be totally remiss if I don't mention this. Craig Smolin is a professional disc golfer. He's also an environmentalist. He works here in town at Triton. He knows environmental issues. He's the perfect guy we could have had designing this for us. He's sensitive to the environmental issues, been sensitive to the issues with trail crossings, and again, redesigned over and over and over again. He's redesigned this course to try to accommodate the needs and the interests of the people. He and I have met with two of the neighbors out there. They were concerned about one of the fairways being a little too close to their property. He's redesigning that to try to make it farther away from at least one of the homeowners. The other one may be a little bit of a challenge to move it. But I think we've gone out, and the commission has been very supportive of trying to accommodate all the needs of people who have expressed concern about this project. And we've done everything we could to try to address that. I mean, look, we live here, and we want people to be happy with the product here. But it's a recreational amenity that's going to benefit the community, just as Jacobs Beach. Some of you may remember there was a lot of outcry when we were talking about the improvements at Jacobs Beach. And I don't think nobody has ever come to say they're disappointed in those improvements there. But there were people that came out in force against that project. It went through, and I know at least 3 of the people who were very vocally against the Jacobs Beach improvements have since come up to me and said, it came out nice. Thank you for doing this in the community. The disc golf course is going to come out nice, and it's going to provide an opportunity for people who have no reason to go into that property to now come and use it. And even hikers who now use it will be able to walk around other parts of the property that they don't get to now. The last thing I'll mention is that we not only do we have the 3 Eagle Scouts, but the troops, I think, are all interested in helping us build this course, and we know that it's going to be almost, I can't say entirely, but almost entirely built by volunteers, and that is typically what happens. That's the culture of disc golf. Disc golfers design it, they volunteer to build it, and they maintain it. I've spoken with the designer of the disc golf course in Wallingford, who was involved with us in our process here. He wasn't able to be here tonight, but and I spoke with the Parks and Recreation Director in Wallingford, where this course is. And that course cost them about $9,000 to build. And it's been there 5 years, and they haven't spent a penny since then because the volunteers keep it up. Wickham Park up in Manchester, East Hartford, is the most popular, I think the oldest and the largest disc golf course in the state. It's 27 holes. But it's a multi-use park. There's a lot of other things going on there. But the director there told me the same thing. Designed by volunteers, built by volunteers, maintained by volunteers. They haven't spent a penny in the 7 years that park has been open because the volunteers take care of it. I can really think of no other recreational amenity we can build with such low cost that will benefit so many people. I don't think I can get a slide and a swing set at Jacobs Beach for $10,000. This is a very inexpensive, we're talking about an 18-hole facility that can attract a lot of people for a very, very low cost. If I can just, I'm going to stop in a minute, Max. I don't want to take up all the time here, but I want to just address some of the safety issues that come up. People will talk about somebody had gotten blinded in California playing disc golf. We're well familiar with that situation. It's a tragic accident. But if you research it, which I did, it was in a multi-use park. I went on a Google map, and I found the park, and I looked from an aerial view. They had a swimming pool there, tennis courts, playground, volleyball, picnic areas, softball, soccer. It was like running it through the center of Bittner Park. In that facility, the disc golf course went and wove around all that. And even disc golfers were astounded, like, well, why did they ever build this here? And so people, again, ask, well, why aren't you doing this in Bittner Park? Bittner Park is a multi-use park. Are there woods behind Bittner? There are, absolutely. But as I mentioned, there are a lot more trails in Bittner Park, a lot of crisscrossing trails. And if people are concerned about discs and trails, Bittner is not the place to do it. I also have a letter, which I think the Board of Selectmen have, from our town's insurance company. I talked to Joey Barbara, a representative from Kerma. I asked him about disc golf and risk. He said his pile of risk management, it's on the very bottom of the pile. It's very low risk. In fact, he said, go build it. Go build it. What are you waiting for? And he sent us a letter, and I won't read all of it, but I think you have it. But he said that while there are no guarantees against liability, you can never guarantee nobody's going to get hurt in anything. But disc golf doesn't present any increased or sustainably different risk exposure when compared to other activities that the town already provides, such as ice skating, a mill pond, skate park, swimming, baseball, football, soccer, lacrosse, gymnastics. There's no more risk, this is from our town's insurance company, than any of those activities. And we provide all those activities, and it's, as we should. But he does mention there are some cautionary things we can do, and there's some signage, which we clearly will do. We would have a sign on the kiosk that would caution both hikers and disc golfers. Hikers, be aware, be alert that there's disc golf going on. Disc golfers, be aware of hikers. And again, Craig will, I think, talk about this a little more, but there are areas where the trails do come across the fairways. But in almost all the cases, they're in front of the tee boxes. So if you're in a tee box, you have a clear view of the trail, and you'll know if somebody's coming there. Just like in golf, you're not going to hit a golf ball if somebody's in the middle of the fairway. I don't know if you can see from back there, but I'll give an example, number 15 here. The tee is here. There's a trail. It might be, I don't know, maybe it's 20 feet in front. I don't know exactly from this. But if somebody's hiking either way on that trail, it's I'm trying to think of the word I'm thinking of. People would clearly, a disc golfer would clearly know if there's somebody on the trail. There's no question about it. One trail that we had suggested with the land trust that maybe a little bit of an issue is right here at the bottom of number 7. I'm sorry, Craig, if I'm taking your thunder, but you can come and explain it better afterwards. But we had suggested, and the volunteers would be willing to do this, if there's a concern, maybe we move that trail a little bit to get it. It's probably 20 feet away from the basket now, but if there's a concern, we can move it a little bit and bring it farther away to make adjust for those issues. We are still open, if there are issues that people have about safety, we are still open to modify this a little bit if we need to do that. This isn't 100% set in stone. The only thing we can't do is move it any closer to the wetlands. We've already got approval twice. Don't really want to go back again. But the commission is open to suggestion, and if we need to move things around a little bit, we're totally willing to do it. We're good people here. We're not trying to make things bad for anybody. And we've been very open to everything we've been talking about here. So anyway, safety, we don't believe is a concern. Again, I also looked online, and I looked up lawsuits for disc golf. I could only find 3. And so there may be more. I found 3. I just Googled disc golf lawsuits. I found 3. One of them was the one I just mentioned. It was in a place where it shouldn't have been. It was a highly multi-used park. There was another one in California. A young boy got hit on a bike, and he got hit in the helmet, but he ended up with some stitches. I mean, I can guarantee you there are a lot more injuries with all the other sports than there is in disc golf nationally. More injuries with skate park. I don't want to shut down the skate park. It's a great thing for the kids. More injuries with ice skating, more injuries with baseball, soccer, lacrosse, football. This is no more risk than any of those. I'll also mention, I'll go on a limb a little bit. I also looked up injuries with hiking. In a Center for Disease Control article in 2006 listed hiking as one of the three most dangerous outdoor activities. I was stunned. Believe me, I was stunned to read that. But I'm sharing it because there are going to be hikers who are going to say to you this is a dangerous thing. But the most dangerous was snowboarding, and then sledding and hiking was listed as a 3rd most dangerous activity. I'm not here to paint a bad picture of hiking, but you're going to hear a bad picture about disc golf, and I'm just sharing information. The last thing I want to mention is, and I already mentioned, it was in the Shoreline Times, the Guilford Courier 3 times, so we've been pretty informative about what we were doing here. The last thing I'll mention, I guess, is there's concern about traffic on Peddler's Road. I met with the Assistant Police Chief and Detective Provinger maybe a month or 2 ago there. We went there, and I asked them if there are any issues they saw. The only issue that they noticed was if you're driving out of the park, the sight line to the right, which I guess is the east, it's not a great sight line. And so I said, okay, but how is it a different sight line if we're having disc golf than it is for people hiking there and driving out of there now? There's nothing different. But because he mentioned that, we can clear this area. This is all town property right here. This is the exit here. We can clear that out. It's small brush, it's things that might inhibit the view looking this way. We can go and clear that out. It is town property. We can do that. And so that was the only issue. They went to the police commission, and I never heard anything back that the police commission had any concerns, other than they did not want to have any parking on Peddler's Road. And that is why we were talking about expanding the parking lot, which, again, as I mentioned, in 1993, the Westwoods Trails Committee asked if we could expand parking there. The parking lot, currently, land trust people, you can tell me better, 5 cars maybe, 5 or 6 cars can fit in here, I think. And we are proposing expanding it into this area here, 60 feet by 100 feet, which would accommodate up to about 20 cars. And that would benefit everybody, hikers, disc golfers, and everybody. Because we agree there shouldn't be any parking on Peddler's Road. As far as increased traffic, the research I did with other disc golf courses in the state, the ones that are more used golf courses, like Wickham Park, as I mentioned, is the biggest, probably the most popular one. They said their peak time would be an average of 20 people. My guess, that's about 10 cars. Most people don't play by themselves. So, I don't think it's going to be a lot of extra heavy traffic there on Peddler's Road. I think I said enough. Craig, would you like to come up and just, do you mind, Matt, if he just fills in the blanks a little bit?
What about parking when there's a tournament? We'll ask questions.
Hi, my name is Craig Smolin. I live at 101 Mariner Circle in Trumbull, Connecticut. I've been employed at Triton Environmental here in Guilford since April of 2010. So when Rick put out a post on Facebook about developing a course here in Guilford, I was naturally interested in helping him out based on the fact that I've been playing disc golf since the summer of 2004. And I've got an environmental geology degree from the University of Michigan. So since our initial walk at Bittner Park, we looked at that park and ultimately decided not to have a course there. I've got some information for you guys. This is a plan off of your GIS site. It shows all the town property along with the entire trail system. And as you can tell, it's pretty extensive. Given that information, along with the topography being not accessible from the main parking areas, Rick and I looked at Peddler's Park, and we found that that was a more accessible land, with the unfortunate note that there wasn't a lot of parking and no bathroom facilities. But as Rick mentioned, they're looking at expanding the parking areas. So over the last 6 months, we've gone through numerous iterations on designing the course, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions. The other issue that Rick brought up, and I also wanted to reiterate, is the unfortunate incident in California. Peddler's Park is a 30-acre park with one main trail loop, as you can see here outlined in black. And it's got the 2 trailheads for the Westwoods area down here. The park in California was 18 acres, and as Rick mentioned, it has an amphitheater, swimming pool, volleyball courts, swing sets. That course was jammed into this park. And as a professional disc golfer, there's no way I would ever have tried to design a course in that park. It's just not feasible. And that's a copy of that site plan. So looking at Peddler's Park, it is the polar opposite. It is 30 acres. It is almost completely virgin land, aside from the trails that I mentioned. It is tailor-made for a disc golf course. There aren't any other existing uses, and we've done our best to locate the holes as far away from the property owners that are abutting on this side and at this corner down here. As Rick mentioned, we've met twice with 2 homeowners. I believe one gentleman lives over here, another gentleman lived down here, and they both in particular had a concern with hole number 9. And I've been back out to the park just today and measured by GPS on my phone the distance from the tee box to Matt Shoemaker's home here. It's about 200 feet from here to here, and from the basket to the property line here, where I believe Pat Coyne lives, it's about 100 feet. So there's a pretty substantial buffer. There's a lot of trees and undergrowth that would preclude anyone from going onto their property. The other issue that was raised is hole 15, and we have a tee box here throwing away from the property line, and admittedly it is about 50 feet from the property line, but this main access road runs right through here and would create a pretty natural buffer between the home over here and the fairway going that way, going to the west. So at this point, I guess if you guys have any questions for me about the design, I'm happy to answer them. And I just want to reiterate that Peddler's Park has no other uses other than Bittner, and it makes a lot more sense to put a course there rather than add a large multi-use park.
All right, this is the portion where we'll entertain questions. Anyone have specific questions of Rich or our designer? Please come on up. Yeah, please come up. Please come up to the microphone. Name and address for the record, please, just so that folks in the viewing audience will have a clear-cut record of it.
Hi, Ted Killiam. I'm on Dennison Drive, 185. How many tournaments will there be? And if you have 80 people show up, where will they park?
Come on up, come on up, come on up.
At this point in time, there are no plans to run a tournament at Peddler's Park. At most, I would probably solicit a local resident to run a weekly league for anyone who wanted to show up. And then down the road, depending on the popularity of the course, maybe we would consider running a tournament where there could be approximately 50 to 70 people, but that would be at most twice a year and more likely just once a year.
I think you would ask about parking. I think if we had done that, if we do run a tournament, we would look at either part of the idea, we'd have a shuttle bus, we'd have off-site parking, maybe at exit 57, there's a parking there, shuttle them in, or we would encourage carpooling, because there will only be spaces for 20, 25 cars there.
Anyone else have questions? Come on up.
Carlton Granberry, 982 Leeds Island Road. Will there be concrete involved in the installation of the course or the tees?
There are 3 or 4 primary tee pads that we can use. One is natural, where there's nothing on the ground. It is, we dig out the stone, level the dirt, and then just define an area to throw off. Another option, as Rick mentioned, is laying down stone dust. I've played at 2 other courses where one uses AstroTurf and another course uses rubber mats, and then concrete is another option at several courses throughout the entire country, but depending on what the town dictates us to use, there are, like I said, five different options.
Anyone else?
A question only a microbiologist would ask, but Norbert Herzog, 222 Peddlers Road, Guilford. What are you going to do for bathroom facilities? You're going to have 20, 30, 40, 50 people out there. They're going to be out there for quite some time. Some of them are going to have some coffee before they go. What's going to happen?
That's an interesting question. Well, they're hikers. You know, I mean, hikers there now, there are no bathroom facilities. Again, I think if we ran an event, we would have to put porta-johns there for that weekend event, and then we'd take them out.
So you have no answer.
I think I just gave it. Yeah, if there's an event, we would have a porta-john there.
But what about during the weekends when there is no event, or people out there? You still have people out there. And you're not talking about a few hikers, you're talking about 20, in your one article, up to 50 people.
Again, people are hiking, and we don't have there's no facility there for that. It's something we'll talk about with the commission. I mean, if we if we decide to put a porta-john out there, that may be something we would have to do. We'd have to see how much use there is.
Anyone else with a question?
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Gamache from 84 Dennison Drive. I just wanted to ask Craig, is it? What your experience has been with designing other golf courses. I also have a geology degree from Colgate University, and I would not at all consider myself a golf disc design person.
As I said, I've been playing disc golf since 2004. In that time, I have assisted in the redesign of Cranberry Park in Norwalk, Connecticut, the design of Veterans Park in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the design of Wolf Woods, a secondary course in Warwick, New York, and numerous other work days here and there throughout Connecticut at Wickham Park, Loughbury Park. So I do admit that this is the first course I've designed by myself, but having played for nearly 15 years, I have a fairly good idea of what makes a good course, good holes, what are safe holes, and I've tried to take all of that into consideration in the design of this course at Peddler's Park.
Can I ask a next
You certainly can.
Okay. Have there been, Rick, we heard you say a lot of things about talking with various professionals and experts, and I was just wondering what studies have been ordered for this particular design in this particular park, and are they publicly viewable? Have there been demand studies, traffic studies, feasibility studies, marketing studies, any of those things?
No, there are no written studies. It's a trend. A lot of times in the recreation field, when you see that there's a trend, pickleball, for example. When we first started pickleball, there were 8 seniors signed up. We now have over 500 registrations over the course of a year, about 120 different people playing pickleball. Did we do a study to see if pickleball is going to be an important thing that people would like? No, we tried it. We knew there was a trend. It was started in Florida and was moving up this way, and it's become very, very popular. Disc golf, I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, is it's a very growing trend. More and more towns are doing it. More and more states are doing it. It's been around since 1970s, maybe even earlier. But it's just a growing sport. And so part of what we do when we see something that's a trend, it's growing, we say, hey, look, we got to look into this. And when we did the tournament at the Guilford Lakes Golf Course, as I mentioned, we had 80 people. Half of them were Guilford residents. We surveyed some of those people. We surveyed people who were part of that, and they said, yes, if you can build a disc golf course, we'll be there. So there was not any formal written study. It's just based on some trends that are going on in the recreational field.
Follow? You're good? Thank you.
Stephen McGuire, 342 Old Whitfield Street, Guilford, Connecticut. This is probably a quick question, most appropriate for Mr. Maynard. Mr. Maynard, what is the size of this room, width and length, in your estimation, if you don't know it off the top of your head?
Okay, I'm going to guess, I'm going to say maybe 60 by 100, 120 maybe?
So just to put the idea of you're going to be on certain parts of this course 50 feet from abutting property or 100 feet, we're basically, to put this in scale for all of us in the room who don't have laser range finders and that sort of thing, basically, if I'm standing here and you're in the back of the room and I'm doing 4, you're it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, Maria Cahill, 84 Dennison Drive. My understanding is this is just the question part, not the comment part, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you consider, I believe a lot of the people on my street sent in letters, and we've actually had neighborhood meetings about this, and a proposal was made, I believe, to you and Rick about a 9-hole course versus an 18-hole course. Now, is that something that is being considered?
Rick?
The plan is for an 18-hole course. I mean, that's what the approval was for Wetlands Commission, first of all, Parks and Recreation Commission, Wetlands Commission, and Planning and Zoning. The plan's always been for an 18-hole course. At this point, that's our plan, is to go with an 18-hole course. It would be up to the Parks and Recreation Commission. This is not a Rick Maynard project. It's a Parks and Recreation Commission project. So, you know, any decision that would be made is up to the commission.
Oh, sure. You mentioned expanding the parking lot, taking down all the trees. Is there going to be, as far as the course goes, there's not going to be any kind of mechanism to close it up at night or anything to that effect, I assume. Is that correct? Or will there be?
Yeah, I think the plan would be, back when it was a park, years ago, there's that old gate that's there. I mean, that's not functional, so we'd redo that. I think the plan would be that we would be able to lock it at night, which I think for the neighbors is a plus, because right now, as you know, anybody can drive in there and go up to where that chain is. Right. They could be there all night if they want to, but I think we would rebuild that gate, and that could be locked off at night. And we have a park ranger that already goes around and locks, the parks, Bittner, Nut Plains, Jacobs, Long Hill, during the April through December months, and we could just add that to the list and have them lock that up.
Okay. So then I would assume that there would be set times as to when the park would be open and closed.
Yeah, if you like any other park, it's dawn to dusk. Right. The park's closed at dark.
And it's all year round, or is it seasonal?
I play all winter long.
Yeah. But the park's still closed at dusk no matter what. Yes.
There's been also a proposal about, in addition to the 9-hole course, about setting more of a buffer between the homes that are right there and the properties that abut the holes. Now, you started to address that a little bit. What is the actual, you gave approximations. Do you know what the actual?
Yes.
There's two specific properties. It's the Schumacher and Coyne property.
Yes.
That are the closest to tee boxes or holes or what have you.
Yes.
So do you know?
Yes, I was out there today. Let me.
Okay.
As I said in my presentation, hole 15 here is about 50 feet. I paced it off from the point where I have the tee box staked to the rock wall defining the property line. That is about 50 feet. But again, we are throwing completely away from that property in the opposite direction, and there should be no reason under any circumstances for someone to turn around and throw a disc onto this private property. The other issue...
Can I stop you for a minute? So it's 50 feet from
this point...
Is that Schumacher?
No, Mr. Schumacher lives down there.
Oh, these are the coins.
I believe the coins live here. I'm not sure what resident lives here, to be honest.
Oh.
But
okay. Okay, that's at the top of Denison, I think, right?
Yeah,
okay.
parking areas right now. Hole 14, we are going to try to relocate it so that it's completely left of or west of the road, the existing trail that comes down here, and then the trailhead runs around this way, and we will be completely to the west of that, and there should not be any impact at all with the homes over here. Now, Rick and I met with Mr. Schumacher regarding hole number 9, and I went out today, and on my phone's GPS, it was 194 feet from this point to this rock wall here. Now, we have since shortened this hole due to Mr. Coyne's concerns about it being too close to his property, and the hole now is roughly here, and that distance from this point to the rock wall here where Mr. Schumacher's home is about 100 feet. So we have taken his concerns into account, and we've taken Mr. Coyne's concerns into account as well.
And what's, I don't think I caught it, what's the distance between the Coyne's property and the
I don't believe the Coyne's property is affected at all anymore, because I've shortened it to this point here.
Okay.
I'm not exactly positive where the property line is, but I believe it's here.
I think he's more up in this area, Marie, because I think this well than this is. So I think he's
Right,
more in this area.
You got to speak louder so everybody can hear.
Sorry, I apologize. And like I said, it's about 100 feet from where I have the basket staked out to this property line. So there's a fairly substantial buffer. The hole itself is short enough that there shouldn't be any reason for someone to throw a disc anywhere near Mr. Schumacher's property. The hole goes is located throwing away from his home. There shouldn't be any reason for someone to walk up to his property line at all. And there's a fairly substantial buffer of trees and other undergrowth in between where the hole would be located and his property line.
And how many points do you know? Can you tell me how many points the existing trails, cross through the 18 holes?
That is
There's a number of places where they cross.
There are a number of places where the course crosses over. There's one here, 2. We'd like to relocate this trail further south here to avoid any conflict here, so that would be 3. There is a crossing here, and that would be 4. And then up here, temporarily, there is a crossing, that would be 5 and 6. But again, if there is substantial concern, about those 2 crossings, then we can both shorten hole 15 and relocate hole 14, depending on those concerns from specifically the land trust.
Yeah, I mean, the concern obviously is people hiking, biking, whatever, don't expect a frisbee disc golf coming, across, whizzing into or by their head, hopefully not into their head, which is different from all the other activities listed
Correct.
by Mr. Maynard, because when you play different sports, you assume the risk. When you're out there hiking or walking your dog, you don't assume the risk of being hit in the head with a frisbee.
That is correct.
Disc.
I was a resident of Norwalk, Connecticut for 10 years. I played at Cranberry Park, and that is a heavily trafficked park with lots of walkers, dog walkers, families. I take my family out there, and there are 2 specific holes that cross trails, and at every time that I was out there, we always gave hikers the right of way. There was signs at those particular points informing hikers that they were entering the course, even though that they had the right of way. And I would absolutely make sure that that type of signage was in those locations that I pointed out where there would be any kind of conflict.
You would also agree with me that there's errant throws, right, when people are playing, right?
There are errant throws, and I've taken that into account in the overall design to try to avoid areas where a disc could hit someone walking on a trail that would not see them, either the thrower or the hiker. And that area in particular is down here, and I am not comfortable putting anything along this slope over here. There's just, the sight lines are not very good. It's hard to tell from a top-down topographic map, but there's a change in the elevation for the trail, and you just can't see anyone coming or going, and I'm not comfortable with that.
How about there was a hole that was discussed at the planning and zoning where there was a good possibility of an errant throw
Yes.
landing in the middle, you're driving up Peddler's Road and it goes out into the road and hits your car.
That hole is located here. This is hole 17. And again, it's hard to tell from this map, but this part is located about 20 feet below Peddler's Road itself. And there is a substantial row of trees, large trees that would not come down, that would tend to block any errant throws out onto the road. And again, it's located at a lower elevation than the road, and that was taken into account in the design.
Bill, I won't take any more time.
No, if you have no.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Questions? Tim?
My name is Tim Sperry. I live at 22 Broad Street, and I have
some volume on the microphone.
Yeah, there you go.
My name is Tim Sperry. I live at 22 Broad Street, and this is a question for Mr. Maynard. It's my understanding that this project was nixed in the fiscal year 2017 budget. According to the minutes of the Park and Recreation Commission, this project was nixed in the budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It was, we had some money in there for, under our park maintenance account and our recreation supplies account. So it was taken out of the budget. And since then we've got a lot of volunteers that I mentioned that we have about $25,000 in in-kind service, and scouts and other volunteers. And so, and we're looking to get sponsors to help pay for the baskets.
And so no town funds were used to mark the trees that are currently adorned with the orange X's, and no town money has gone into the maps or any of this in the fiscal year 2017 budget.
So was it printing costs for the maps? Yes. I don't know what they are. There's, the engineering office, I think, did that. Have we had some staff time? Have I been out there? I have. That's part of my job. Whether it's Jacobs Beach or Calvin Field or any of the projects, it's a Parks and Recreation. It's a recreation function.
Okay. And one last question. From, I'm going to date myself. I don't remember when it started, but I do remember when it ended. There was another function that Peddler's Park was used for in the late 50s and early 60s. Do you remember what it was?
Well, I wasn't there, but I understand it was a landfill at one time.
Yeah, correct.
Burning dump, I think.
No, it was the dump. And I spent many years as a child going there on Saturday mornings with my father. It was the dump.
Okay, yeah.
Any other questions?
If I could just, regarding that gentleman's comment regarding the former historic landfill use, as I understand it from Rick, those areas unfortunately are primarily focused in this wetlands area here, which we are prohibited from building in to begin with. Now, if we encounter anything in the ground during the construction of the tee box or the removal of a tree or the installation of the basket, we would immediately contact Rick and let him know that we found something and figure out a way to proceed. But it is our intention to avoid all of those areas where there may be buried debris.
Pam Brown, 522 Peddlers Road. I have several questions. This plan, is this the plan that was approved by Planning and Zoning? Okay, so is there going to be another plan submitted that will take into account these buffer areas they're talking about, and is anyone going to approve that, or is it just going to be left to them saying, oh, we'll try and make this a little better?
Rick?
Well, as I said, this is the approved plan. It's approved plan by the Wetlands Commission and Planning and Zoning.
But at that time, at that meeting, when there was discussion, it was you stated there would be changes to address these issues, but then we've never seen anything in writing that gives us that.
So I think Craig addressed that. We met with a couple of neighbors, and so number 9, we already have talked about moving that one. That's this one right here. So we're shortening that one to move it farther away from one of the properties there. We've talked about, he just mentioned number 14, moving that so it's not crossing the trail here, moving it over this way a little bit more. So this is the approved plan, but as I said earlier, that when we go out to put the tee boxes in, if there are 5 trees or big trees right in front of where the plan was, we're going to move it over a little bit because we're not going to cut those trees down. It's a plan. Obviously, there's got to be a little flexibility within the plan once you get out there and actually do the work because of the layout of the trees.
I'm more concerned about the buffer zone for the properties abutting, because there's 6 houses that are directly touch against, or property lines against Peddler's Park, and I just don't know if that is really being addressed appropriately. There are little children who live in some of these houses, little young children whose property line is very close to this.
Well, again, I think Craig addressed that when he mentioned how we met with people out there. He's looking at moving them over as much as we can. Obviously, there's a trail in one of these areas here, so we can't now cross that trail because that creates a whole different issue. But look, as I said earlier, we're willing to work with everybody as much as we can to make this happen. And if it requires a little bit of adjusting here and there, we'll do it.
And then our house happens to be close to where the parking lot is. And you had stated no trees would be cut down on that side of the parking lot. There is a very large tree that presently has a big orange X on it.
And where's that? Can you show me on the map?
Oh, I don't know.
So this is where you come in. This is the current parking lot. And all the trees in here are the ones that are coming down.
Here.
Okay, well, I don't know what that is.
It's a big X on a big tree.
Kevin, could you shed any light on it?
The other ones are marked by that parking area, so if anything's...
Yes, it is on the parking area, but the question...
The parking area is in here. The new parking area. But you said in the old parking area?
Yeah.
I know, Kevin's a town tree warden. I mean, I don't know, any tree that's posted.
I'm here today. I know the tree you're talking about. It's very large.
Right.
And it's probably about, in the parking space, it's probably about 5 feet from the space, maybe 10 feet at most from the current small footprint, and it's a large double limb tree.
Is it on this side of the parking lot or this side? We're not doing anything on this side.
Here, and it is on this
And there's another one that's right here as well.
Yeah, well,
that's equally as nice. Right in there.
Anything that's
No,
within that zone
it's
of the
that
parking
part.
lot's coming down.
Yeah, it's somewhere right in here.
There's that big dead pine tree, we're talking about the same
No,
area?
it's not pine
No,
tree.
no, I mean, we're talking about the same
Yeah.
location. I don't know what that is, we'll have to look at that.
It's a nice majestic deciduous tree.
Kevin, would you take a look and see if you would have marked anything in the area that they are saying,
town tree,
that
folks.
Pam is saying it was
Where
marked?
where are they coming to? This is the present.
This is the current parking lot, correct, yep.
This is Peddler's Road.
Yep.
This is where it comes in, and it's
Yep.
about here.
Didn't
Or
mark,
it could, someone has marked an orange tree somewhere in this area.
they have nothing posted or anything on that side of the driveway. Everything I posted for removal is on the west side of the current driveway into the park there. So I'll go out there and see what somebody's marked there. And like I said, I posted and not marked anything on the east side of the current existing driveway. So I'll investigate that.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
And then my other questions may be directed more to you. What are the rules going to be for the people, the kids, for young people coming into play disc golf?
In regards to
Okay, in
what?
regards to, are people just going to come up, drive up, drop off 5 or 10 kids, and leave them for a few hours, and then are they going to follow rules
I
like?
can't answer that. I don't know who's going to use the park. I know if I was...
That would be best addressed to Rick, I think.
Yeah.
Rick, I think this question is better addressed, better handled by you. Pam, would you restate it, please?
I'm sorry.
So my question was, what are the rules going to be for the park? Is there going to be an age limit or an age distinction of what age a child can be dropped off without parental supervision? Because with other kinds of sports, there are coaches, there are parents, there are other people around, but are kids going to get dropped off and given their opportunity to?
You go first.
All right, I would say that, like any other park, I mean, parents have to use their common sense. I wouldn't drop a kid off at Jacobs Beach for the day and let him just run around all day. I wouldn't let him go hiking at a certain age. Do we have rules in the parks? I mean, again, at Jacobs or Lake Quantico when we're open, when the beach is open, I'm trying to get this off the top of my head, but I think it's under age 12. They got to have a parent with them. Claire, I don't know if you remember because you bring your kids there a lot, but yeah, I mean, a parent can't just drop their 8-year-old or 10-year-old off at the beach and just leave them unsupervised or supervised by our lifeguards.
Can they leave them here
Right.
for this?
Again, I mean, parents have to use common sense. We can't legislate everything and just say, hey, you can't, parent, don't leave your 4-year-old here. I mean, people have to be smart about it.
I would say, as a parent of a almost 9-year-old... Sorry. As a parent of a almost 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, I'm not going to drop them off unsupervised and then drive away because that would make me a bad parent. That being said, it is my intention at some point down the road, once the course is installed, to run a formal clinic. Now, if a parent sees that I've got my kids there and there are other adults present,
That's different.
I think that would be a different
Appropriate.
situation.
Right.
That's something that's organized, the town has taken steps to run it, but just dropping a child off is never going to happen unless the parent is not really taking suitable care of their child. So I don't think that I hope answers your question. I hope.
I'm going to follow up with the question here. Would the Park and Rec Commission consider an age requirement to play without a parent as in supervision, like you do at Jacobs Beach or like you do at Quantico? I think that's really the question.
Yeah, Matt, I think we would. Certainly, you know, we can list, we're going to have a list of rules that will be up on the kiosk.
Right.
As I mentioned, hikers be alert, disc golfers be alert that there are hikers there. And we could certainly have there that, you know, no children under age 12, you know, allowed without adult supervision. Pretty much like we do at the beach.
I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think probably, one more question. I don't know who is presently supposed to take care of that part or the proposed part, but there's tons of trash down the side of Peddler's Road where that drop-off is. There's trash all along there, and is anyone going to...
We would do that. Disc golfers would do that. We would take care of the course. Absolutely, 100%.
Because no one takes care of it now.
I really don't think that's the question. There is already existing garbage along that area, and who is responsible for it today? That's really the question, not
but I think you said
who's going to be in the future.
It's okay, so here's the road coming into the park, and it's really past where it curves around, and it's like where,
Are people
I don't know if it's here or here, oh, it's probably here.
If it's anywhere on a proposed hole, we would maintain
No, I
that.
think she's talking on Peddler's Road itself.
That's
That's not, I mean, Parks and Recreation is responsible for the roads.
It's Peddler's Road, but it's where this steep embankment.
Oh, it drops down into the park?
Yes.
Okay, I think Craig is correct that when the volunteers are out there doing the work, they'll clean that up.
And the only other thing I would guess I was wondering is I'm not sure if it's a good point, but there are, in that same area, there are some very big, large trees that have fallen over the years. One area, I believe, from lightning, the very, very big trees. And are you taking, if those, to me, they look like they'd be coming across here.
If it's dead and it's on the ground, we would like to
take
them away.
Is someone going to do that, and then what are they going to do with them?
Turn them into benches. We've done that at many courses throughout the state. Absolutely.
And then I'm not sure, there's another area of concern. I hike and walk along here all the time, so I'm very familiar with pretty much all of this. Somewhere in probably this middle, there's a large stand of hemlocks that are all dead because of the parasites. And are those going to be
I don't know where they are. If someone would point those out to me, and if they're on a hole, and if they're dead, then there's no reason for them to remain standing.
Right.
And we would take
And
those out.
they are a danger because
Sure.
when it's windy, they could fall, and some of them have fallen.
Sure.
I'm going to assume that Kevin McGee would be involved with any decisions related to taking down trees because they appear to be dead.
Yeah, I would be involved as they go through it. They'll just let me know. I'll go take a look at the trees, of course. Anything that has to be removed during that process, I would have to tag, and any brush, the areas where brush cut out, would also be flagged and noticed.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any more questions.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anyone else with questions? Please go.
My name is Karen Klein. I reside at 71 Denison Drive, and I have a question for Craig. I just want to make sure that I heard correctly that The hole, which is number 9, did you say that there were no holes that were on the dump site?
Again, I can't be 100% positive where the dump was located. But
Okay.
it is my intention to make sure that we don't locate anything on something that would be unsafe to a hiker or a disc golfer.
Okay.
But there's no formal mapping, and Pat's your husband?
Yes.
He and I've walked out there numerous times with him, and as he knows, and I'm sure he's told you, there's things throughout that park, but we're trying our very best to avoid those specific areas, those areas that you can visibly see something coming out of the ground.
Yes, thank you. So our property does abut hole number 9, so it's my interpretation that it's 50 to 75 feet away from our property line.
It was initially, yes.
And that is 100% on the dump site.
If you have mapping, I'd love to see it. Pat, as I said, I'm an environmental consultant, and I've tried to find mapping on that landfill, and I can't find anything. So if you have something, I'd love to see it.
Yes, we can show you the sharp protruding objects, and my husband is an environmental scientist, as you know,
Yep.
and he has gone over this with you. It's 100% on the dump site.
Anyone else? Questions? Any?
Hi, my name's Andrew Page. I live at 414 Moose Hill Road here in Guilford. The reason, Rick, you haven't gotten a lot of input from the public is because most people assumed that property was actually part of Westwoods. In my heart, I truly believe that. In regards to Bittner, no one uses the Bittner trails, so that's just a comment I felt like I had to put in there. Long term, I'm assuming you guys will budget for the porta potties, the shuttles, and the extra trash pickup for the area where the parking will be. And then I guess my most important question would be, should the Frisbee golf become as popular as you have stated the pickleball has become, what will be the contingency plan to deal with all the extra people that want to show up and use that golf course?
Well, Andrew, I mean, it'd be a little hard to answer that because we don't know for sure how popular it's going to be, but we also know that it's only going to be able to accommodate X number of people. We can't have 100 people out there. It's not, just can't happen. But again, based on my conversation with other towns that have disc golf courses, a typical peak time is 20 people. So it's not a lot. 20 people, again, they're scattered all out the area. They're not 20 going to, they go in groups of 2 or 4. So they'd be spread out. So, and Wickham Park is it's about 7 years old, I think, right, Craig? And that is the oldest, I believe, the oldest in the state, or one of the biggest in the state.
Wickham Park was installed in 2003. The oldest park in Connecticut is Fairfield University, and that was installed in the late 90s.
Okay.
And then Cranberry Park was installed in 1999. But Wickham Park is, by most accounts, the largest and most popular course in the whole state.
Right. Again, they told me their peak time is generally around 20 people. So they've been around for 10 years or so.
Any others? Why not?
Hi, Michelle Gamache again, 84 Denison Drive. I guess this is not the comment section, but I guess my concern is that when people are talking about, we don't know how many people are going to show up, we don't know how much traffic is going to be generated, we don't know, the popularity and how it's going to grow. As I questioned earlier, I was asking about any type of studies that were ordered. It just, with all due respect, this kind of seems like a fly by the seat of your pants. Let's put a couple courses on this topo map and stick it up on the wall and see what fits. There are no professional studies that have been done. There are real people being impacted by this, real people's homes being impacted by this. And I understand your need and desire to want to put a golf course here, but it just really seems like much more professional consideration could have been provided here. I think that developments such as this typically have studies done, subdivisions, golf courses, all other types of development projects typically have some type of professional studies done. And I'm hearing you say there have been none done, which concerns me as a citizen and as a neighbor. And then the other request I would have is if you would consider, if the board would consider, once the holes are being moved or pulled back from people's property lines, I think it's not unreasonable to request that that go through the approval process again. I think that that makes a good amount of sense. People have to know where these holes are going to be located adjacent to their properties. I think that's the only fair, reasonable thing to do and to request as a neighbor, as a citizen of this town. I think that that sets good precedent, it sets good example, it sets good visibility. One of the things that we've been hearing, one of the things that I've been learning is that this process has been not entirely open to the public. Sorry, Rick, that's just sort of the way that this has all kind of been come about for all of us. We heard about the planning and zoning meeting 5 days before Christmas, when many people are off doing, in holidays, many people are off and out of state doing other things, and it just seems like this process is very sort of slapsticky, haphazard, and I know that that's more going to the comment section, and I apologize for that, but I just felt like it was important to have a continuous sort of stream of thought. I hope that this would come up again for reapproval, because it sounds like there are holes that are going to be moved and real people being impacted.
Rick,
Thank you.
I think there were a couple of questions buried in that. If you want to try to take a couple of those.
Yeah, so I think that if a hole's being moved, it'll be moved farther from your property. That's what Craig is committed to doing from the properties that are there. So not closer. So, I mean, it's not up to me to decide if there has to go to any other approval process. That's beyond me. All I can do is say that the Parks and Rec Commission has come up with a plan, presented a plan, plan's been approved. If there's a need by any agency to go back and change the plan, we'll have to do that.
Thank you.
Can you please come up? Please.
I want to hear from the Boy Scouts. I'm sure they have to go home for school, but anyway. Kay Larson, 289 Laurelbrook Drive, Guilford, Connecticut. I guess I just got all riled up listening to the last woman say the comments about the disc golf and the impact on her neighborhood. And I just want to say that when our sons were in Guilford High School, there were 5 boys at the high school in our neighborhood, and every day after school, and our Laurelbrook Drive is a residential street like Denison Drive. I've spent a lot of time there. I know people there. And I just want to say, and every lot is filled like yours, but ours is also a longer residential road than yours. But the boys played disc golf from telephone pole to telephone pole in front of everybody's house every day after school. We never had one complaint. It was, you know, there were cars a lot of times with that many homes. There were a lot of young children, and I can only take a lot of negative for so long. I do understand. I live right near Vintner Park, and there's lights on at night, and I can hear people yelling and screaming. But in my mind, that's joyful. And I also have to say, having taught in the Guilford schools for 28 years, we teach disc sports in the schools. And we have a lot of fun with it. And every spring at Adams Middle School, Mr. Phillips and I would set up a disc golf course all around the fields. And that would be the physical education classes for part of the spring programs. And it was wonderful. We just had such a fantastic time. And I'm sorry, this wasn't a question, and I apologize, but I couldn't sit still any longer. I just had to say something. So it is a family sport, and I just think it's wonderful. And I can't wait to hear what the Scouts have to say about it. Thank you for your time.
Can we come back to questions at this point? Thank you.
I'm Patricia Keegan. I actually spoke at the hearing, and to your point, I didn't have a question, I had an objection. And so I wasn't allowed to really convey my concerns. I'm hoping that there are some listening ears here about the concerns. The access to this park and the traffic and the road itself and the dangers that it could cause by people who are unfamiliar with the road are being totally minimized. I live on Peddler's Road. It is a windy country road that I do not want to change by potential sidewalks. If I wanted sidewalks, I would live in the center of town. I do walk on the road, and in order to walk safely, I change the direction, not the direction, but the side of the road I'm walking to accommodate for the curves and people coming around. And those are people who are familiar with the road. It is inconceivable for me to think that there will be people who are not familiar with the road coming to use the park, speeding down the road, and not only me, but bikers, runners, walkers on the road that are going to be in danger of their lives. And that's aside from the park itself. I used to take my dog for a walk when he was alive into Peddler's Park. Like Andrew Page, I considered it part of West Woods. And it was a quiet, peaceful place to go. And that's all going to change. And if people think that this is a quiet sport, I don't know any sport that people do not yell and encourage each other. And the people that are going to be impacted the most are on Denison. And so on behalf of nature, peace and quiet, the environment, trees, I don't hear anybody advocating for that. I took pictures of the markings on the trees that will be taken down just for the parking lot, and it's horrendous to me. The trees create a natural sound barrier against the highway for the people who live in that area. Those are coming down. And they're not going to be encouraged to grow anymore either. So my question is there going to be an initiative to plant more trees to create a barrier to accommodate for these people who are losing that natural barrier?
I mean, I can't tell you we have a plan to plant trees. I mean, we're taking trees down in the parking lot. But if I could just step back and not to negate your concern about Peddler's Road, and it is a windy road, there's no question about it. But there are already people hiking who are driving on that road. And so I don't see any difference people driving there now to hike.
But when you're going to an organized sport and there are more people going, a hiker is one or two at a time. Mm-hmm. And there is no expansion of a parking lot required for hikers.
Well, right, but we're expanding the parking lot, which will accommodate everybody, hikers,
right.
disc golfers.
And in order to do that, you're cutting down trees. You're cutting down trees and you're disturbing nature, as far as I'm concerned.
All right.
So,
Are there any other, do you have another question?
No, I'm just...
Well, is there anyone else who wants questions?
So I asked before about whether or not there would be consideration for possibly a 9-hole versus an 18-hole, and I was told by Rick, no, we're making it an 18-hole, or that's the plan. So I guess the question is, what do we have to do to have a 9-hole course be considered instead of an 18-hole course? I mean, you know, we're the neighbors and we live around, and a lot of us have voiced our concerns, but we're willing to make compromise. And I feel like there should be some compromise on both sides. And it's clear to me that Parks and Rec is going to develop this property no matter what. We've already been through the dog park. If not this, then what? I mean, personally, we all feel like it should stay the way it is. It's beautiful. It's open space. We consider it part of Westwoods. But it's 33 acres owned by the town. So, okay, we have to deal with that. We're willing to work with them. But it would be nice if I felt that was sort of coming back a little bit. So what is the process? Is this a done deal? Are we just here just to kind of hear the sounds of our own voice and express ourselves so we feel better when we leave and cathartic? Or is there a means, is this a means to an end? I mean, I guess I just want to know.
I'll take this, and certainly any of the other board members can respond. I would expect that the Park and Rec Commission would provide an answer after some deliberation as to whether or not they will consider a compromise as a 9-hole golf course. I would actually have a note to myself here to make sure we followed up on that. As it relates to Park and Rec having the authority to go ahead and do this, the town code is quite clear that the Park and Rec Commission has the authority, is the legislative authority for parks in Guilford. However, because this program, as presented, requires the expansion of a parking lot, ironically, that falls back to the Board of Selectmen. That is why we are having this, that's one of the reasons why we're having this hearing, in addition to the fact that I felt, and I think this board felt, that a project of this size deserved more public scrutiny and opportunity for people to express their opinions and to ask questions about it. So, to your question, I don't think it's a done deal, and this board has the option to make a decision on it as to whether or not we move forward with approving the expansion of that parking lot. Without the expansion of that parking lot, there will be no 18-hole golf course, and probably not even 9-hole golf course, unless the commission decides that they want to do a 9-hole golf course or an 18-hole golf course without expanding that parking lot. And I think that is clearly unfeasible. I can't see how that would happen at this point. There are also some other things that I want to answer that were in some questions here. Relative to the process, does it have to go back to planning and zoning? Council will probably tell me not to answer that question, but I hate this term. I sound like a consultant. That depends. Is it further encroachment on wetlands? Is it further encroachment on property boundaries? But the hearing for planning and zoning, and correct me, was for the applicable use of that property for that activity. Inland wetlands was because of the potential for encroachment on inland wetlands. So if they move something that is closer to inland wetlands, they obviously have to go back. Regarding planning and zoning, I don't think planning and zoning has to weigh in on it again. But again, I'm going to defer to council. And but we will have those answers for you as well.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Going once? Going twice? Closed. We are now at the public input portion. So anyone who is willing to come up and share your thoughts, we may need to start a line on the side if it looks that way. For the record, I'm going to waive the requirement for these young gentlemen who are going to have to speak. Traditionally, you have to be a property owner or a voter. to weigh in at public hearings and town meetings. So with the board's indulgence, can we waive that for this purpose? Go ahead.
Okay, hi, my name is James Crossley, and this is my friend Cliff McCoyak. We're both...
There you go.
Okay. Do I just press select? Is this working? Okay. Hi, my name is James Crossley, and this is my friend Cliff McCoyak. We're both from Troop 471, and we go to camp at Camp Sequasin. And Camp Sequasin has a really good disc golf course. And what's interesting is the disc golf course at Camp Sequasin is literally right in the backyard of our troop campsite. It is 20 feet away from our campsite. And it crosses quite a few major trails where scouts do walk across daily. However, I would like to say I have never had any experience with disc golfers interfering with the troops and the scouts at Camp Sequasin. Also, I'd have to say that disc golf is a pretty fun sport. You can have a really good time with your friends. You can go hang out, and it's not like a big impact. And I'd like to say I feel like right now it's being slightly blown out of proportion. But however, I still think it would be a really great idea for this town to have, and I think it would be really good fun for all the citizens who live here. And overall, I think it would have a positive impact.
Thank you.
I just wanted to touch on the aspect of citizenship and just the community aspect within this proposed disc golf course. I know that our troop, one of our major activities within the troop is we play ultimate frisbee a lot. We have sort of a team, and at camp there's tournaments and stuff like that. And so I know it'd be a huge interest to all of the people within our troop, and I know all their friends would want to play. And I think it's just a great opportunity for people in the community to just get out and have fun with their friends. So,
thank you very much. Next.
Carlton Granberry, 982 Leeds Island Road. And to preface before my statement, I have no opposition to disc golf as long as it's put in an appropriate place. And I certainly have no opposition to scouting and scouting projects because I was a scout in Guilford 55 years ago, and I think it's a great organization. To the Board of Selectmen, I drove by Peddler's Park on my way home from work. I've heard of frisbee golf generally played informally with temporary features, but not disc golf. This is a new one to me, with weighted projectiles, concrete tees, etc. My understanding is that this proposal is advocated by a handful of Guilford residents and a lot of non-resident backers. My supposition is that with the obscurity of this activity, it's probably a fad that will have about the popular lifespan of a hula hoop. In the meantime, the town will be cutting down trees, pouring concrete slabs, putting in parking spaces. How many parking spaces will be needed to host a tournament on this course? Who will pay for them? Who will maintain them? How many Guilford residents are actually interested in paying for and maintaining a disc golf course? Like other singular focus activities that crop up occasionally, wouldn't it be wiser for these private interests to pay for them with private money and locate them on private land? Briefly put, this appears to be a fad with a large footprint, which may be gone in 10 years after having partially clear-cut a large parcel of public land and installed concrete pads, possibly, and enough parking for a tournament. When the excitement of disc golf has passed in Guilford, who's going to pay for the removal of the concrete pads or other fixtures? Who is going to pay to restore the site? And what are we going to use all those parking spaces for? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ari Golub, 1 Sherrill Lane, Guilford. So I appreciate hearing a lot of information today. I've been a disc golfer for a very long time. I've been playing for about 20 years now, and I probably have as much experience in this room as anyone. I am a father of 2 kids in the school district. I'm also an executive director of a summer camp. So I know about disc golf. I know from a parent point of view. I know from a professional point of view. I've played probably almost 100 disc golf courses in my life, up and down the East Coast. Let me tell you, first off, this is one of the best sports. Why? It's inexpensive for kids. They could go, they could have fun. You do not have to have a lot of money to enjoy this sport. It is not a loud sport. If you've played golf before, you know the noise of golf is kept low. Disc golf are professional when they're behind the disc. They are respectful for people out there. They know that there are other people that are going to be hiking. They will always take a back seat to those hikers. I've never seen, in the thousands and thousands of times I'm out there, have I ever seen a disc hit another person. I'm a golfer as well. I've been hit twice, and I've been almost hit many more times. It is not like golf. This is a very fun sport. My kids, one of the best times was when my kids were old enough, and they're still young. We go out to Wallingford, we play as much as we can. It's the closest disc golf course we have here. They have a great time. It's a great chance to get outdoors with your kids. It is a great time to actually bond with kids. As an executive director of summer camps across the country, I've been able to see disc golf courses on my camps. And never have I ever had a child or a staff member get hit with a disc golf. And we put them in baskets, places that are a little bit more popularized than this disc golf course. I will say right now, though, I would not be in favor of 9-hole disc golf. My family wouldn't use it. We play 18 holes. That's who we are. So I would urge you to really think about the 18 holes versus 9. Bathrooms, I would say 75% of the courses I've played do not have bathrooms. Disc golfers know when you go out to play disc golf, you go beforehand, you go afterwards. It's not at the course most times. I've never seen kids dropped off. The hula hoop is actually still a fad at our camp. Very big, so disc golf, it continues to grow the way it is. It'll be great. I lived in Richmond for many years. We had 2 disc golf courses when I first got there back in 2000. They now have 8. It is a popular sport for them. They get to keep on growing. But what's really nice is they've been able to build a community, a family community around the sport that, again, is very inexpensive. It has very little effect on the environment. As the executive director of summer camp, we take that really serious, what the environmental impact is. This is really creating more trails. I think it is a wonderful idea. Talking about the windy roads, Bittner Park is on a windy road that has traffic all day long, in and out. This is not going to create that type of traffic whatsoever. I think the 20 disc golfers at the peak areas are really the time that you're going to see the heaviest traffic on a Saturday afternoon when it's really nice. Outside of that, I think it's a great thing for Guilford, and I'm excited for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Anderhagen, 200 Landon's Way, and the Board of Selectmen already has my concerns in writing, but I will state them again. And my request was to pause on the disc golf course. I have nothing against disc golf. I have never played it, but really on the funding issue for the town. And my request was, if we're going to spend town money, and there is some, that we should do a cost-benefit analysis for the town. On the cost side, there's one set of costs where I believe Rick asked for $25,000 of program money to be set aside for expenses for disc golf. Another set of costs is Rick's time and the time of other people that work for the town that should be quantified. If we're, as taxpayers, paying for these employees, we should know how the time is being spent, and we should have approved that it's worthwhile for the town to fund this. And the next thing is future maintenance, and there will be maintenance. There's tees that the Eagle Scouts are volunteering to put up, but those tees are not going to last forever. And then we did mention the potential lawsuits and whether there will be a cost for that or not. And on the benefit side, Rick has mentioned time and again that we don't know how many people are going to play. So I would request that before we cut down trees and spend taxpayer money for this course, we should know how many people are going to play. And there's ways to do that that don't involve setting up a course and then hoping people will come. And there are other trends that should be examined. I personally would like to know curling is a trend. It's in the Olympics. Why are we not looking at setting up a curling course somewhere in town for that money? So that's really my request. I really thank the Eagle Scouts for wanting to do the work for free, but your guys' timeline for doing a project shouldn't be our timeline for the town. So that's
Thank you,
it.
Susan. Right now, Tim, you just ran up against the end of the tape, so we're going to take a couple-minute break.
You're dating yourself to this. It goes to Joe.
Yeah,
Biden.
whatever.